Babies.
You do all the other stuff beforehand.
Yep. So I got it. So, yeah. You get to this point, I should just put the button, sit down, and listen.
How do you focus that
Perfect.
on here? How do you?
Good morning, everybody.
So, you see.
The opening line in the
See that
Science
square?
of Mind
Square
textbook
Yeah.
is one that really caught my attention and really appealed to me. And what it says is, we look forward to the day when science and religion shall walk hand in hand through the visible to the invisible. That really appealed to me. So today, I'm going to explore some of the science behind spirituality, some of the science that explains to us perhaps a little bit about how our brain works. So I'm going to focus mainly on the science of the brain. I'm going to offer up some scientific research that helped me to understand why my thinking tends to go in a certain direction. And it just seems to happen all on its own. The brain is very fascinating, amazing, and so very complex. The scientific community is still learning the how, the why, and the what of our brains. So I'd just like to start with a few key facts about our brain. It is shaped by evolution, weighs about 3 pounds, has 1.1 trillion cells, including 100 billion gray matter neurons. The brain is always on. Even though it's only 2% of our body's weight, it uses 25% of our oxygen. The average neuron has about 5,000 connections, or synapses, 500 trillion in all. The synapses are firing 1 to 100 times a second. And there's millions of them operating in any given minute. It's a highly connected network full of circular loops. This I found quite interesting, is that we have a number of possible brain states. But what I did not know is that we actually have one followed by 1 million zeros. That's the number of brain states that we have, which leads this to our brain perhaps being the most complex object known in the universe. Ever had one of those days when everything is just fine? You're just going along, everything's fine, then something happens. Maybe you hear a little bit of bad news, or you're stuck in traffic, and before you know it, your thinking has gone down the rabbit hole, spiraled to a place of negativity, of doom and gloom. Well, I have really good news. It's normal. It's natural. There's a scientific basis for that happening. There's nothing wrong with us. It's our brain. So today I'm going to share with you some science behind why our brain slips down the slope of negativity and a little of what we can choose to do about it. Actually, our brains are pretty young when we take a look at biological evolution. When we consider that the Earth is 4 billion plus years old, that life has been around for about 3.5 billion years, that we only have 650 million years of multi-cell organisms. The nervous system has been in place for 600 million years. Only 200 million years of mammals, 60 million years of primates, and a little over 6 million years ago, our ancestors evolved from the ape from chimpanzees. We as Homo sapiens are only 150,000 years old. In our evolutionary process, in our evolutionary history, we've gone from a reptilian brain to a paleomammalian brain to a neo-mammalian brain. And science has uncovered something that is called the brain's negativity bias, making it more like Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for the good ones. Essentially, as our ancestors evolved, it It was important to avoid sticks, to avoid predators. Our very existence depended on our ability to avoid danger. We were constantly on high alert, always looking over our shoulders, and this activity is still very present in our brain today. The brain's negative bias looks something like this. We scan for bad news, over-focus on it, overreact to it, and install it in our memory. Thus, this sensitizes our brain to the negative and creates vicious circles within, which leads us to this tendency towards loving negativity. For example, we're more upset by losing $50 than we are by finding it. Just take a look at how the weather is reported. Chance of rain, 20% chance of rain, chances of rain. What if we reported 80% chance of sunshine? Even our English language contains more negative emotional words, in fact 62%, than positive emotional words at 32%. We are biased towards the negative even in our language. Perhaps this is a residual effect that is left in our brain from evolution. We seem to have a case of automatic vigilance, something else, by the way, which has been studied by science. Basically, it's what happens when confronted with threatening stimulus. People typically devote increased attention to that stimulus, raising the accessibility of similar information in memory. An example of this is found in an account made by Captain Lewis of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Captain Lewis made an entry in his journal where he describes how he was traveling alone, well ahead of his group, determined to find the best route. Suddenly, he was surprised by an aggressive grizzly bear charging at him from out of the bush. Lewis narrowly escaped with his life by jumping into the river. After this, he makes his way back to his troops. Along the way, he notices a variety of other animals, most of which he perceives as threatening, and several of which he immediately shoots. In his journal, he describes feeling surrounded by danger, and I quote, It now seemed to me that all the beasts of the neighborhood had made league to destroy me. The editor of the Lewis and Clark journals, in a footnote on this passage, says that the animals that Lewis encountered along the way were not typically considered aggressive or dangerous, and forms the opinion that Lewis was probably nervous. He had a heightened awareness after his frightening encounter with the grizzly. The example from Lewis's journal illustrates the phenomena of automatic vigilance. And with that working within our brain, no wonder it's easy to head down that path of negativity. And it doesn't stop there. Bad is stronger than good is a masterpiece of an academic article published in 2001. The authors meticulously go through topic after topic: personal relationships, learning, memory, self-image, and numerous others that show that bad packs a much stronger impact than good. They reviewed a couple of 100 diverse studies to make this point. The consistency of their findings about the disproportionate impact of bad things compared to good things is depressingly consistent, study after study after study. They come to the following conclusion. From our perspective, it is evolutionary adaptive for bad to be stronger than good. We believe that throughout our evolutionary history, organisms were better attuned to bad things. The organisms that were better attuned to bad things would be more likely to survive threats and consequently would have an increased probability of survival and of passing this down through their genes. The article goes on and on and on, consistently concluding bad is stronger than good. The closing paragraph implies one solution to overcoming the bad. Although it may seem pessimistic to conclude that bad is stronger than good, there are several reasons to think it may be highly adaptive for human beings to respond more strongly to bad than good. In the final analysis, the greater power of bad may itself be a good thing. Moreover, good can still triumph in the end by force of numbers. Even though a bad event may have a stronger impact than a comparable good event, our lives can be changed and made happy by the virtue of having more good events than bad. So we live in the 21st century with a Stone Age brain that's like Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for good ones. The more that I learned about my brain, the more compelled I am to learn to find ways to see good in my life. And although my brain is just 3 pounds of soft, gushing tofu-like tissue, it has 1.1 trillion cells, 100 billion neurons, averaging about 5,000 connections with each synapse. It's like having 500 trillion microprocessors wired together, working in a network. These neurons typically fire 5 to 50 times a second. Just for a moment, clap your hands. In that half a second that it took you to clap your hands, billions of synapses have been activated in your brain. Most brain activity is lightning fast and forever outside of our awareness. The slower stuff is what we call thoughts and feelings, and it's just the observable tip of the iceberg. Like a refrigerator, our brain is always on, with billions of neurons firing every minute just to keep us alive, just to keep us ready. Your mind is not physical. You can't touch it, but it's still real. The brain represents your mind. All mental activity, your thoughts, your feelings, require neural activity. The mind is what the brain does. The mind is what the brain does. Our brain is continually moving back and forth between stable states, followed by disturbance and then reorganization into a new stability. These rhythms of stability and instability occur over long periods of time, such as our adolescence, and over short periods of time, perhaps even 100 times a second. Within our brain, there are large numbers of neural assemblies that keep changing, that are continually pulsing. Each pulse is a momentarily stable waveform which rapidly decays and disintegrates. An illustration of impermanence, which is one of the 3 fundamental characteristics of existence as identified by Buddha. There is a kind of fertile instability, an instant of spacious neurological possibility out of which the next pulse of stable order comes. That spaciousness is the kind of emptiness akin to the absolute nature talked about in Buddhism. In short, the brain works through an exquisite combination of specialization and teamwork. Different parts of the brain do specialized things. One part of the brain produces meaningful speech, while the other part is in charge of comprehending it. The self is spread out in the brain, which means that we get the sense of self through our experiences, through all of our experiences, remembering, though, that the negative ones tend to stick like Velcro and the positive ones tend to slip off like Teflon. But wait a minute, there's some good news coming out of science as well. Each brain is unique for many, many reasons. There is a genetically based variation in the quantity and sensitivity of receptors in the brain for dopamine, serotonin, neuroprion, and many other neurotransmitters. Secondly, there is new research revealing subtle but important differences in certain aspects of the male and female brain. Thirdly, the synaptic connection that corresponds to something as simple as the number 1 is different in 1,000 tiny ways in the brains of different people. So each of us thinks of the number 1 in a different way. Fourthly, whatever our genetic endowment might have been, events in utero and from the moment of our birth right up to this present moment in time have all influenced our brain. This calls, I think, for a special respect for our individual differences, and perhaps even a little compassion for ourselves and for others. Rick Hansen is a psychologist and author of of many books, Hardwiring Happiness, Buddha's Brain, Just One Thing, Mother Nurture. So he suggests a method for deliberately using the mind to change the brain. And he calls this taking in the good. And this is how he describes the process. Just having positive experiences is not enough to promote lasting well-being. If a person feels grateful for a few seconds, that's nice. It's much better than feeling resentful or bitter. But in order to really suck that experience into our brain, we need to find ways to stay with those experiences for a longer duration of time. We need to take steps consciously to spotlight on the positive. We need to actively weave them into our brain. So there are 3 steps that he recommends for taking in the good. And he notes that he didn't invent them, and in fact, they are embedded in many good therapies and many life practices. However, he suggests these 3 based on his understanding and his knowledge of the evolutionary process of how the brain works. So the first thing is to let a good fact become a good experience. Often we go through life and good things happen. A little thing, like we checked something off our to-do list, we survived another day at work, the flowers are blooming, the sun is shining. But he suggests that we just take this as an opportunity to let ourselves truly feel good. Perhaps an opportunity to really smell the roses. He suggests that you need to make it as intense as possible, to feel it in your body for as long as possible, to intensify and sustain any good experience, even for 10, 20, 30 seconds. And finally, to make the intention that this experience is really sinking into you. Sometimes people do things through visualization, like imagining a golden light coming in through themselves, or imagining a jewel going into the treasure chest of your heart. Just do something that lets you know that this experience is sinking into you. The brain is quite amazing when you think about it. How can it store so much information, memories, feelings, all those things? When you look at the way it works and how your whole body works and how it evolved over time, it is unbelievable. You are not doomed by your genes and hardwired to be a certain way the rest of your life. A new science is emerging that empowers all human beings to create the reality they choose. In Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza, he bridges the gap between the science of quantum physics, neuroscience, brain chemistry, biology, and genetics to show you what is truly possible. As I come to a close, I want to share with you these words from Joe Dispenza's book regarding how we can change our beliefs and perceptions. And he says, you must combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion that conditions your body to believe that the future potential that you have selected from the quantum field has already happened. Act as if it is so. The elevated emotion is vital because only when your choice carries an amplitude of energy that is greater than the hardwired programs in your brain, that your body will actually be able to change, that you'll be able to change your brain's circuitry, your body's genetic impression, as well as condition your body to a new mind. There is more good news. We can use our mind to change our brain. Repeated patterns of mental activity require repeated patterns of brain activity. Repeated patterns of brain activity change neurological structure and function in our brains. Basically, this translates into that neurons that fire together, wire together. What that means is that as the circuits get used, as we use our mind, there is a strong connection that takes place. And our experiences matter. They leave behind an enduring trace. Mindfulness and concentration meditations activate different parts of our brains. This means that every Sunday, when you participate in the guided meditation before the Sunday service, you are hardwiring your brain. You are using your mind to change your brain for the better. And there's plenty of scientific research that show the benefits of mindfulness practice. It can trigger patterns of it can trigger neural patterning. It can access positive emotion circuits. It increases the serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter supporting our mood and our sleep. It stimulates our nervous system for relaxed well-being. We can use our mind to change our brain, which benefits our well-being. As we use our mind to activate different brain states. Since the neurons that fire together, wire together, we can deliberately cultivate wholesome states of mind over time, creating permanent structural changes in our brain. These changes are about uncovering the Buddha nature. Studies confirm that ancient teachings of Buddha actually nourish conviction, sometimes called faith, which is one of the 7 factors of enlightenment. Holmes had this to say about faith. The measure of our faith in the infinite is the measure of our capacity to draw from the infinite. This is why the great teacher said, "It is done unto you as you believe." If we can believe in a great good, then much good can come to us. It is according to our mental acceptance or mental equivalence, according to our faith, that life manifests through us. In closing, I just want to leave you with a verse from Dharmapada, which is actually a part of 423 verses that were uttered by the Buddha. So I just invite you just to take this in. Think not lightly of good, saying, "It will not come to me." Drop by drop is the water pot filled. Likewise, the wise one, gathering it in little by little, fills oneself with good. And so it is.